In 1905, Albert Einstein proposed the famous theory of relativity. In 2020, I now have clear evidence to propose my own revolutionary theory, the theory of Manhwa. There cannot exist a discussion about Manhwa without mention of solo leveling. Solo leveling is so goddamn popular, and it's not without reason. The story is amazing, the main character is badass, and the art is some of the greatest we've ever seen from a manhwa. Once you get hooked onto solo leveling, there is no way out. This is no joke. Most solo leveling fans I've seen treat newly released chapters like it's some kind of exotic crack cocaine. Therefore, because solo leveling is so good as a manhwa, people naturally want an anime for it. They want it so much, in fact, that there's a change.org petition for it with over 145,000 signatures. Unfortunately, I don't think that a change.org petition will actually do anything, but it just goes to show how much people want a solo leveling anime. However, there is just one problem with solo leveling that makes a high quality anime production for it, in its current state, very difficult. The author, Chu Gong, shits all over Japanese people. Okay, just look at what's happened so far. In the manhwa, we've already seen what was the strongest hunter in Japan, Goto Ryuji, get absolutely manhandled by Sung Jinwoo. And honestly, that part's fine, everyone gets manhandled by Jinwoo. But the bad part is, nearly the entirety of the Japanese squad on Jeju Island gets absolutely yeeted by the Ant King, while only one person, Min Byung-gyu, dies from the Korean squad, and he gets a beautiful ass send-off. After reading this, it's clear to most people that the author does not like Japanese people. But oh boy, if you think that's bad, wait until you read the light novel. I'm not going to spoil anything, but essentially, the author portrays the Japanese as overconfident, cocky, backstabbing pieces of shit, and then something happens, which I won't go into details about, but it gets even worse. It's pretty clear the author is driven by his political biases when portraying the Japanese like this, but I mean, what can you do? It's his story, he can do whatever he wants. So, how does this connect to solo leveling, possibly not getting a good anime? Well, I'm not going to get into the complexities of Japan-South Korea relations, but TLDR, political tension between South Korea and Japan is quite high in the present. And keep in mind, these are two countries that have a strong amount of nationalism within their respective populations. Because of this, most Japanese animation studios are probably very hesitant in picking up solo leveling as an anime in its current state. The main issue is that there would be an enormous amount of backlash for portraying their own country in such a negative light. The high amount of anti-Japanese sentiment, combined with the current state of high political tension, makes it unlikely that any Japanese studio will directly adapt the solo leveling story as it is currently. Of course, every problem has potential workarounds, so let's go over some of them. The first option is that some other animation studio, other than the ones in Japan, makes the anime. The idea here is that because this anime is likely not to be produced by a Japanese anime studio, at least in its current state, a Korean or Chinese animation studio could produce it instead. The problem with this is what solo leveling fans want is high quality animation. They want to see all their favorite scenes from the manhwa be animated in all its glory. They want to see crisp and amazing CGI. And when Sung Jinwoo says, "Arise," we want chills to run down our spine. But all the studios that produce really high quality fight scenes and detailed animation are in Japan. Of course, getting something is better than getting nothing, but I think that many people will prefer a reliable Japanese animation studio to make a solo leveling anime. The people that end up making this decision also know this, so I believe that this outcome is quite unlikely. The next option is that the anime is adapted with a story change, so it becomes more acceptable for the Japanese audience. In my opinion, this is probably the best option. This doesn't mean characters or plot points should be completely removed, but rather there should be a change in the names of the characters and the Japanese nation. This is totally viable. This has already happened with the Japanese version of Solo Leveling, where all the Korean characters and places have been localized to Japanese, and the neighboring country is called the DFN instead of Japan. I think if the story does end up getting altered, the best method for it is to probably keep the Korean characters the same, but just change Japan and its characters to a random imaginary country. I think that with a slight alteration like this, Japanese anime studios might be less reluctant to pick up the project. But the problem is, even with these changes, the implications of anti-Japanese sentiment are still there, so additional alterations might have to be made that end up affecting more important elements of the story. But honestly, this is probably the best method to getting a high quality anime production for Solo Leveling. The last option is not really an option per se, rather than a decision from the author. If Chu Gong starts to realize that keeping on the path of the light novel might end up affecting the chances of Solo Leveling getting a high quality anime production, he might still be able to turn away from the path of shitting all over the Japanese. So far, although it's been semi-bad with what's happened with Japan in the manhwa, it is not too late. He can still make alterations to the future story and prevent the totally negative depiction of Japan, at least in the manhwa. Of course, the downside to this is similar to the last option, because it could lead to alterations being needed for significant plot points in the future story. But at least the good thing is, if us fans start to recognize this happening, at least we can be sure that Chu Gong isn't totally set on keeping an anti-Japanese depiction and is at least trying to tone it down for possible future anime production. Overall, I believe that a Solo Leveling anime is inevitable. Its popularity is just way too great worldwide, so there is so much potential revenue to be had. Even in Japan, Solo Leveling is one of the most popular webtoons, which shows that many in Japan would also be happy to have a Solo Leveling anime. The only question is, will Solo Leveling get the anime that it deserves? We don't want a One Punch Man Season 2 or an Overlord Season 3. We want something like One Punch Man Season 1, where the animation is so detailed we can see the ripples in Sonic's testicles. The hype moments in the manhwa are only made possible by the amazing art, so it would be a big disappointment if the animation of the anime adaptation ended up being subpar. But until that day of the anime announcement comes, we'll just be here sniffing new chapters.